Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslim kathira. Allahumma bika nasta'een wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. We seek Allah's help. We ask for His forgiveness and mercy. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no change and no might except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we gain of good from these lessons is not from ourselves, but it's from Allah's mercy on us. What we benefit from in these lectures and lessons in our own lives is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanting good for us and increasing us in understanding of His religion. Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fid din. Whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends good for and wants good for, then He gives him greater understanding of His religion. And that understanding is the understanding of information and the understanding of implementation, that He gives that individual success to learn more about the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that learning has an effect on that individual, and that he tries to implement, or she tries to implement, that which he or she has learned. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and to give us success to draw near to Him in these types of gatherings. The Quran has special focus in Islam, and especially in the month of Ramadan. Islam is based upon the Quran, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ramadan is a special time for the Quran. Allah alludes to that and hints to that in Surah Al-Baqarah when He mentions in the ayat of fasting, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran. That it's the month of Ramadan at the beginning that the revelation began. The Quran began in being revealed. And the idea of fasting has been mentioned in previous lectures. The idea of fasting is a way of showing gratitude. That Musa alayhi salam fasted on Yawmi Ashura out of appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for saving him and Banu Israel from Fir'aun. No. And so a part of our fasting is appreciation, that we appreciate the revelation of the Quran, that we realize its importance. And it is the lasting miracle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oftentimes we talk about the moon splitting and the water coming from between the fingers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the barakah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with. But the greatest miracle that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given is this Quran. But only a person who Allah blesses to read the Quran and to reflect on the Quran and to have a relationship with the Quran will see that it's a miracle. وَكَمْ مِنْ آيَةٍ وَكَأَيٍّ مِنْ آيَةٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ عَنْهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. How many ayat in the heavens and the earth do they pass by and they turn away from them? How many ayat in the heavens and the earth do people pass by each day and they pay no attention to them? Any of the clouds that move in the sky. That's not, it's normal to us, but a collection of gases and dust that water comes out of is not normal. It's not something that's regular. The idea of a ball of light moving across the sky every day and then disappearing and then coming back, that's not normal. It's not something and we take it for granted that these types of things happen. The fact that the fluid of a man and a woman, the fluid of a man and a woman come together inside of her body, and that fluid turns into bone and muscle and teeth and eyes and ears, and then speaks and walks, and talks, grows hair, nails, and argues. And that's some strange stuff. Those are ayat. These are things that we see every single day, that people see every single day. And because they see them so much, they pay no attention to them. As the saying in English goes, familiarity breeds contempt. when you see something often, then you take it for granted. And we don't want to be that way with this Quran. This Quran is a miracle. And again, only those who reflect that Allah blesses to reflect on His ayat will see the miraculousness of the Quran. And so because the Quran is given special attention, and He's given more attention in this month, that we want to look at how we can better benefit from reading it and understanding it, especially for many of us who may not speak Arabic, may only have English translations at our disposal, or may speak a minimal amount of Arabic. How am I supposed to benefit from reading the Quran? So we want to look at how to benefit from reading the Quran, and hopefully these benefits, they follow you in the prayers that you pray at night, because a part of those prayers is, again, our appreciation and reverence of the Quran. And we stand up and pray doing what? Reciting the Quran. Reciting the Quran, reciting the revelation that was revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then also we increase our reading of the Quran. And when we say reading, it's not just recitation, and sometimes we get caught up in that we just recite the Quran. And reciting the Quran has its reward. For every harf, for every letter that you recite, you get 10 hasanat, 10 good deeds. And that was not the purpose of the Quran being revealed, was not simply to be recited, but it was to be reflected on. Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarak liyadabbaru ayati. It's a blessed book that we have sent down to you so that its ayat can be pondered upon, so that you can reflect upon it. Because reflecting upon it helps you to see the miraculous nature of it. It helps you become more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for you to love Him more. No. And so I've put together, it could be done a lot better, but it's what I was able to put together within the time. I put together a 2-page document. The brothers with the Imam Muslim Family Center, may Allah preserve them and bless them all. They uploaded it to the Facebook page, so you can download it and follow it, because without having something practical to use, it's going to be difficult to kind of keep up with the lessons. I'm just going to be talking. Not everybody is an auditory learner. Some people are visual. They need to see something in front of them. So, and then sometimes just mentioning ayat, it's difficult to remember it and keep it in your mind and try to understand from it. So I want to give you something that you have in your hands, and then hopefully throughout the rest of Ramadan you can reference and follow with, in order to be able to, use and to go back to as you read, inshallah. So the first point in terms of becoming a better reader of the Quran or reflector of the Quran, and again, we're dealing with, I haven't put any Arabic on here because I'm assuming that the majority of people who will be reading will be English speakers and may find difficulty with the Arabic. If you do know Arabic, then these principles can still be used. The first one, and we're going to follow the sequence of questions that are commonly asked. The first one is to look at who's talking, and appreciating who's talking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking, and Allah is all-knowing, omniscient, and He is wise. He is Hakim, and He knows human beings. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ? Does not He who created know His creation? So what's in this Quran is based upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that we need, and that everything in the Quran is placed and said with a purpose. It's not like in some other books, religious texts, where you might have things that a person's not going to benefit from in terms of his salvation. Some of the introductory chapters of the New Testament, they mention genealogy. So-and-so begat, so-and-so begat, so-and-so begat, so-and-so. It just tells you the lineage there. How am I supposed to benefit from that lineage as it relates to my salvation? The Quran is different. Everything that's in the Quran has a purpose. Everything in there is for your salvation, which we'll see the importance of as comes. Because some people look at the Quran as if it's a science book. And people get, they look at all the miracles of science and biology and chemistry and physics are here in the Quran. Okay, that's great, but the problem with that is twofold. The first problem is most of what's in science is theory. It's not law. So what happens if you put all of this confidence in these theories and whatnot, and then you find out that they've changed? And does that now weaken the strength and the validity of the Quran? Number two, did Allah send down the Quran to explain science to you? Or did he send it down for your salvation? So it's important that we not miss the purpose. Everything that Allah tells us has a purpose. And that's the first subpoint, number one. Everything in the Quran is meaningful and purposeful. Every single word. Every single word. And so if we look at the first example, which is taken from Surah Al-Hajj, chapter number 22, ayat number 27, it says, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. Call, yani, proclaim to all people to come to the pilgrimage, yani to Hajj. They will come to you on foot and on every lean camel from every distant path. Here, you'll notice the adjective lean. They will come to you on foot and on every lean camel. What's the significance of lean? Why a lean camel? And the Arabic word used is dhamir. Why a lean camel? Why not just a camel? Well, here's the question. How did it get lean? Yeah.
Because even if all that a person has to suffice himself with that type of wealth is the lean, skinny camel, they'll even use that to try to fulfill that command.
Well, the person mentioned that maybe perhaps it's because, wherever a person has to be able to make the journey, he should use it. That might be, but the idea of if the animal can't make it, then you wouldn't want to take that trip. How would it get lean? How would an animal get lean?
Slaughter.
No, you slaughter, it's going to stay just as it is.
Oh, yeah.
How's it going to get lean? How's an animal going to get fit and lean?
Coming a great distance.
Coming a great distance. Excellent. And so the idea here is the idea of the camel being lean. And it was lean when it got to Mecca. It was fat when it was at home. But that long distance, by the time it arrived, it was lean. The idea is to show how far Allah is talking with, and people coming from everywhere, from all the corners of the earth, and to show you how far people are coming for these rites that are only in a 6 days maximum, 4 days minimum. People are coming a long distance for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that people are answering that call was proclaimed to the distance of the earth, which also shows the spread of Islam. How far Islam reached because of how far people are coming from in order to be able to recognize these rights. So the idea of this ayat is here to show the importance that every single word, every description has in the Quran. Again, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is Hakim. He puts everything in its appropriate place. And so every word has significance. Number two, as we mentioned previously, that Allah wants your salvation. And this Quran, first of all, who are we talking about? We're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is wise and all-knowing. So everything that he says has a purpose. Number two, Allah wants your salvation. So when he talks about things, he's talking about things in order for you to be saved. And so Allah mentions in the same surah, ayat number 5, Ya ayyuhan nasu in kuntum fi raybin min al-ba'thi فإنا خلقناكم من تراب ثم من نطفة ثم من علقة ثم من مضغة مخلقة وغير مخلقة لنبين لكم ونقر في الأرحام ما نشاء إلى أجل مسمى ثم نخرجكم طفلا ثم لتبلغوا أشدكم ومنكم من يتوفى ومنكم من يرد إلى أرذل العمر لكي لا يعلم بعد علم شيئا وترى الأرض هامدة فإذا أنزلنا عليها الماء اهتزت وربت وأنبتت من كل زوج Bahij. Allah says, O humanity, if you are in doubt about the resurrection, then know that we did create you from dust, then from a sperm drop, and in the mixture of fluids, then developed you into a clinging clot of blood, then a lump of flesh, fully formed or unformed, in order to demonstrate our power to you. Then we settle whatever embryo we will in the womb for an appointed term, then bring you forth as infants so that you may reach your prime. Some of you may die young, while others are left to reach the most feeble stage of life, so that they may know nothing after having known much. And you see the earth lifeless, but as soon as we send down rain upon it, it begins to stir to life and swell, producing every type of pleasant plant. So here in these ayat, pretty long ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the stages of growth of the human embryo in the womb of the mother. What is the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning that? How is that connected to our salvation? For what purpose does Allah mention the stages of growth and development of the embryo in the womb? Yes?
As a display of his power.
As a display of his power. Okay, Jameen. Why does Allah want to show us his power? Yes?
So we'll fear it.
So we'll fear him. Good. Why else? Yes?
So you'll acknowledge it.
Okay, why would, see, the brother said, why? So you will acknowledge his power. Why or how do people deny his power? Yes?
By shirk.
They, okay. By shirk they deny his power. In some ways, yes. How else?
They denounce the resurrection.
They deny the day of judgment. That Allah is unable to bring your bones and flesh that has disintegrated and gone away, that he's able to bring that back to life. So notice how he begins. How does he begin? How does that begin?
Oh, humanity.
Oh, humanity. He's not talking to the believers. He doesn't say here, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. When Allah is talking to all of mankind, he's talking to those things that they need to affirm in order to be saved. Because people in general deny the day of judgment, not the believers. The believers accept it. Mankind, then what does he say? Oh, humanity.
If you are in doubt.
If you're in doubt about the resurrection, then don't forget your own creation. If you're in doubt about the resurrection, then don't forget your own creation. And why talk about the creation of people as opposed to the creation of the heavens and the earth?
Relativity, because it's relative to who we are.
It's relative to who we are, and we see it all the time. You weren't here to witness the creation of the heavens and the earth, but you witnessed the creation of human beings. A man and a woman who are intimate with one another, they see or know the fluid that comes out of them. And they see the growth in the womb. And the woman feels the movements of that infant inside of her stomach, inside of her womb at a certain point of time. And then they see that live baby come out. If you are in doubt about Allah being able to bring your flesh and bones back together, don't forget that you were created from semen. You were created from a liquid, and he turned that into a full-grown speaking body. So the one who can do that, don't doubt the fact that he can bring you back together. The one who did it the first time is definitely able to do it again. And he mentions what you didn't see, which was that he created you from dust. He mentions what he told, and he uses two types of evidence here. What the ulama call is sam'iyya wal aqliyya. He uses revelation, and he uses what I'm going to refer to as creation. And he uses what you can see and rationalize, and he uses what he tells you of revelation. Where's the revelation here? He says, we created you from dust. That's revelation. Why is it revelation? Because you weren't there to witness it. Allah told you, I created the first human being from dust. And you yourself, you witness the creation of every other human being from your progeny, from your children. You witness that yourself. These two are evidence of the day of judgment. And so again, Allah is not telling you about the embryo to prove science to you. That's not the point. No, the point is this is supposed to help you to believe in the day of judgment. Just as clearly as you see that baby come out that womb, know that you will come out of that grave. Know that you will come out of that grave. Now, and then notice what he says at the end. He says, and you see the earth lifeless. You see the earth lifeless. But as soon as we send down rain upon it, it begins to stir, yani with life, and grow. And so why is Allah mentioning the growth of plants here? Yeah. Yeah. Why does he mention the growth of plants here? The dead earth and the growth of plants? Yes.
How things come about and then they demise and come about again.
That how things live, they die, and they come back again. Which proves what?
Yeah, something that we witness.
Which proves what?
Life after
The
death.
resurrection.
Resurrection.
All of these things here in this ayah deal with the resurrection. And so Allah is affirming for you he's giving you 3 different pieces of evidence for the resurrection. The first, that he created the first human being from dust. So when you become dust, then what? He can bring you back to life, because that's how he created. That's how he created who?
Adam.
The first human being. The first human being was created from dust. So when you become dust, it's not impossible conceptually for him to create you, because that's what he created the first person from. Number 2, you see human beings being born every single day. Number 3, maybe a person is barren. You say, I haven't seen any children given birth to. Well, you've seen the earth. You've seen the winter come and everything die. And the springtime come and everything come back to life. And the fall come and everything begin to die again.
So there's no room for doubt.
So there's no room for doubt. You see it every single day. But Allah is calling you to remember. And a part of this Quran is that it's a dhikr, it's a reminder. A reminder of what? A reminder of what you already know deep down inside. A reminder of what you see every single day. Now, the next point is that these concepts that are discussed in the Quran, they're connected. Whether you see the connection or you don't see the connection. And in the ayat that come one after the other, they go together. Now, you might not see how they go together, but the fact that you don't see that doesn't mean that they don't. And again, that goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom. Every ayat is sequenced properly. There's a relationship between what's mentioned in sequence. So we'll look at an example of that. This example is taken from Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21 of the Quran. Allah mentions about the prophets. إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ وَيَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ والتي أحصنت فرجها فنفخنا فيها من روحنا وجعلناها وابنها آية للعالمين إن هذه أمتكم أمة واحدة وأنا ربكم فاعبدون. Allah says, when he talks about the prophets, and I wish we could go through the whole sequence of ayat before this, because it's a wonderful read. And it's really encouraging. Allah talks about the various prophets. And he talks about their different needs. And so he mentions Dawood and Suleiman and how they had to judge between people and how Allah blessed them with understanding to be able to judge between people. And that was a need. And then he mentions Ayub, alayhi salam, who's in a difficult situation and he needed Allah's help. And he mentions Yunus, alayhi salam, who made a mistake and he needed Allah's forgiveness. And then he mentions Zechariah, whose wife was barren, and his need and desire for a child, and his want. And how, again, Allah mentions the different prophets. Why does he mention the different prophets? To show you the different needs that people have. And that Allah is able to answer all of these needs. And then he says, indeed, they used to race in doing good. They used to race in doing good. And call upon us with hope and fear, totally humbling themselves before us. Indeed, they used to race in doing good and call upon us with hope and fear, totally humbling themselves before us. Okay? Who are we talking about? The prophets. Jimmy, all right, just keep that point in your mind. They. So it says, indeed they. So where you see they there, you can circle that or underline that and put prophets. That's who we're talking about. They, the prophets. Because that's going to be significant when we look at the next ayah. It says, they used to race in doing good. What does that mean, they used to race in doing good? Yeah.
They competed in doing the right thing.
What is doing the right thing? What is that?
Obedience to the Lord.
Good. And obedience to Allah is what?
Their rub.
Worship. Obedience to Allah is worship. So, when they used to worship Allah, they used to hurry to worship Allah. They used to hasten to worship Allah. When it was time to fulfill their duty to Allah, they used to do it. Okay? So they used to hasten to worshiping Allah. And also do what? And call on us with hope and fear. What does that mean, they used to call on us?
Dua.
They used to make dua. Why would they make dua?
They had need. They had they needed help.
They needed help. May Allah bless you and your family, increase you in knowledge and action. Jameel. Huh? Good. They needed help. All right. Now put these two together. Indeed, they used to race in doing good. We said that means what?
Doing worship.
Worship. And they used to do what? Make dua. Why did they make dua?
They needed help.
They needed help. This ayah is an explanation of what? Iyyaka na'bud wa iyyaka nasta'in. You do we worship, and you do we seek help. Right? Because remember, the prophets are our example. The prophets are our example. And Allah mentions them in Surah Al-An'am, chapter number 6 of the Quran. He mentions them as an example for the Prophet ﷺ. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ هَدَاهُمُ اللَّهُ فَبِهُدَاهُ مُقْتَدِهِ. These are the ones, meaning the prophets, that Allah guided. And so, follow their guidance. These are the ones that Allah guided. And so, follow their guidance. So we get إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. This is the practical example. Allah shows you prophet after prophet, and in each situation, whether it was making a decision, like Dawood and Suleiman, whether it was a hardship, like Ayub alayhi salam, whether it was because they had wronged themselves, like Yunus alayhi salam, whether it was because they needed something, like Zechariah alayhi salam, in all of those instances, they did what? They sought Allah's help. That's the example. And that seeking of Allah's help is worship.
Yunus.
Yeah, Yunus.
That was,
he's the one who Allah told him to
fish.
Yes.
Well.
You're right. And he called out in the well.
That was Yunus.
That was Yunus alayhi salam, yes. Jonah.
Jonah, right?
Yes.
Yunus.
No.
And the last one.
Ayub was Zechariah. Zechariah.
No, wait a minute.
Ayub.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yunus,
Dawood and Suleiman.
Suleiman.
Ayub, Job. He was the one that was afflicted with illness, and he asked Allah to relieve him. Right. So in making a decision, that's Dawood and Suleiman. In dealing with an affliction, a hardship, Ayub. In seeking forgiveness, wronging yourself, Yunus alayhi salam. He ran away from his duty. He was upset.
The dua.
Right. Right. Allah, I wronged myself. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minal zalimin. There's none worthy of worship of you. Exalted are you. Indeed, I have oppressed myself. Right. And Zechariah, when he wanted to have a son, and his wife was barren. And in all of these situations, they used to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that calling on Allah is worship. وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. And your Lord says, call on me, and I will answer you. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي. Those who are too proud to worship me. Too proud to worship me, how? Because they don't call on me. Because when you call on Allah, that means you feel a need for Him. When you don't make dua, that's really saying, I don't need you right now. I'm okay. I'm good. Allahu Akbar. Allah make us of those who call on Him more and feel our true need for Him. Now, so the idea is, the examples of the prophets is that they used to, when they worshiped, they would be quick to worship. They would do what Allah says immediately. And they used to call on Him. Iyyaka na'bud wa iyyaka nasta'in. This is an explanation of that. وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ. And they were totally humbling before us. They were totally humble. They were totally humbling themselves before us. Now, totally humbling themselves, that's the word for khushu'. That's the word for khushu'. And Allah mentions khushu' in another ayah. I want you to go down. It says, compared to Surah Al-Fatiha, which we've done. And it says, compared to external ayat 1 below. So if you go to external ayat 1, it says, it's from Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ وَأَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. It says, and seek help with patience and prayer. And seek help with patience and prayer. So we want Allah's help. One of the ways that we get Allah's help is by what? Being patient. And by what? And by praying. By praying. Because in your prayer, you're also making dua. What dua are you making in prayer? Guide us. Guide us. That is from the most comprehensive dua to make. Because whatever it is in your life that you need in order to stay connected to Allah, you're asking Allah to do it for you. Which is going to be different for different people. It's going to be different. Teach me more. Give me success to do what I need to do in order to be successful. Bring the things in my life, the relationships in my life that I need in order to be close to you. If a person is in the habit of saying and meaning, Ihdina siratal mustaqim, perhaps when that person gets married, Allah will bless that person with a good spouse that will help to further push them and encourage them to get close to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so seek help with patience and prayer, and that's going to be difficult. Yani either seeking help or prayer is going to be difficult, except for those who are what? Humble. That's the same word that was used to describe the prophets. Alayhim salam. Why were they humble? What made them humble? Those who are certain that they will meet their Lord and return to Him. What is this belief in?
The resurrection.
The day of judgment. It's belief in the day of judgment. So if a person wants to improve the quality of their worship, if they want to improve the quality of their worship, then one of the greatest ways to do that is to increase our understanding and belief and ask Allah to increase our belief in the day of judgment. The importance of belief in the day of judgment. When you know that you're going to meet Allah, when you know that you're going to die and have to stand in front of Him and take account for your actions, it makes a change in your life. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, whoever believes in Allah and the day of judgment should do what? Speak well or keep his mouth shut. The only way you're going to remember to keep your mouth shut is if you know that you're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and answer for every word that you say.
Every word.
Now, I'm going to show you another miracle of the Quran. So we've connected here worship, seeking Allah's help, and belief in the day of judgment. Go to Surah Al-Fatiha. Maliki Yawmuddin. Yawmuddin is what? The day of judgment. Then what do we say right after that? Iyyaka na'bud wa iyyaka nasta'in. So you mention your belief in the day of judgment, and then right after you mention that, you mention, you do we worship, and you do we seek help with. The prophets used to worship Allah, seek His help, and they had khushu'. Why did they have khushu'? A part of that was because of their knowledge of Allah and because of their belief in the day of judgment. And that's the sequence of Surah Al-Fatiha. It begins with knowledge of Allah. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmuddin. All that's telling you about Allah. And then when you get to Maliki Yawmuddin, belief in the day of judgment. And then after you affirm your belief in Allah and your belief in the day of judgment, what do you say? You do we worship, and you do we seek help with. And the idea is that, again, everything in the Quran is purposeful. And you'll find that these ayat, they complement one another. The same thing that's mentioned here in chapter number 21 of the Quran is already affirmed in the very beginning in Surah Al-Fatiha. And again, this is where you begin to see the miraculous nature of the Quran. This is where you know that no man put this book together. You couldn't be that consistent. You couldn't be that consistent in a message if it was from a man. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes?
Hanif, I have a question.
Let's say the questions for the end. Yeah, that way we can get through, because I still got quite a bit to get through. Sorry. So the next ayah in that sequence, no problem. The next ayah in that sequence of Surah Al-Anbiya. So he mentions the prophets and what they used to do. And then he says, and remember the one who guarded her chastity. So we breathed into her through our angel Jibreel, making her and her son a sign for all people. And remember the one who guarded her chastity. Who was she? Maryam. Good. Now, what I want you to notice, in the previous ayat, Allah said they. Who was Allah talking about when He said they? The prophets.
Yeah.
Then in this ayat He says, and remember the one. And we said that the one He's talking about here is who? Maryam. Why mention Maryam now?
So that He can include an example for the women.
Jamil. So He's including an example for the women,
Even though
and He's including example for non-prophets.
Oh.
Including an example for non, because maybe a person reads this and says, well, those are the prophets. What about everyone else? What about everyone else? And so Allah shows you one who's not a prophet, even though an angel came to her. So this is also affirming something in terms of our creed. The idea that even though an angel came to her and revealed something to her, that she's not a prophet. That she's not a prophet. Allah mentions her after the prophets. They used to call on, any of the prophets, used to call on us in hope and fear, and were humble. And then the one who guarded her chastity, showing a separation there. So affirming that even though an angel came to her, she's not a prophet. But even though she's not a prophet, she still used to worship Allah. And used to be devout in her worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah, as you mentioned, Jazakallah khair, gives an example of a woman. Gives an example of a woman for everyone else. That this woman reached a status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That she is one of the few women mentioned in the Quran And if I'm not mistaken, she's the only woman mentioned by name. She's the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran. She's a special woman. Now, and so, what category does Maryam fall under? What category does Maryam fall under? If you go to the external ayat number 3, or sorry, go to external ayat number 2, it says, when we recite Surah Al-Fatiha, we say, Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. The path of those whom you have blessed. The path of those whom you have blessed. If we go to external ayat number 2, you see it? Chapter number 4, ayat number 69, it says, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسَنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. Whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger will be in the company of those whom Allah has blessed. Whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger. If you practice Islam like you're supposed to, then you will be amongst those whom Allah has blessed. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Who are those whom Allah has blessed? Allah mentions them here in this ayah. They are who? The prophets, the people of truth, the martyrs, and the righteous. They are who? The prophets. Who's after the prophets? The people of truth. Okay. These are the ones that Allah has blessed. When we say guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have blessed, these are the 4 groups of people that Allah has blessed. The prophets, the people of truth, the martyrs, and the righteous. Go down to external ayat number 3 now. Now, Allah mentions in Surah Al-Ma'idah, ما المسيح ابن مريم إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل وأمه صديقة كان يأكلان الطعام. It says the Messiah, the son of Mary, and Isa, was no more than a messenger. Many messengers have come and gone before him. His mother was what? Was a woman of truth. She was a Siddiqah. She was a person of truth, a woman of truth. The people of truth are the next people in terms of those 4. Again, let's go but take a step back. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. The path of those whom you have blessed. Who has Allah blessed? The prophets, the people of truth, the martyrs, and the righteous. In this 3rd ayat here, Allah mentions that Maryam was a what? Was a person of truth. Was a person of truth. Who are right underneath who?
The messengers and prophets.
The prophets. And so in this chapter, chapter number 21, the chapter of prophets, Allah mentions the prophets. And then right after the prophets, He mentions who? Maryam. A person of truth. No, exactly. A person of truth. So that same sequence is found. That same, in chapter Anbiya, that same sequence is followed. The prophets and then the people of truth. But both of those categories, they used to do what? They used to hasten to the worship of Allah. They used to hasten to the worship of Allah. And they used to call on Allah with hope and fear. And they were humble worshipers. And from whom we know a male example of the people of truth was who? Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He was from the people of truth. From the Siddiqeen. The idea here again, reading the Quran regularly and noticing patterns. When you're reading the English Quran, The translator is going to use certain words for certain Arabic words. When you see the same word being used again, begin to make comparisons. People of truth, people of truth, people of truth, people of truth. When you see that same description being used, see what's being said about that. Everything is connected. This is from Allah. This is not from some man. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything goes together. Everything that we've read in this sequence of ayat, we've seen goes back to what? Surah Al-Fatiha. Goes back to Surah Al-Fatiha. And that's the next point when it comes to reading the Quran. Is to realize that from the miracles of the Quran that Allah has blessed me to understand. And I talk about Shaykh Tahir a lot. Hafidhullah, he's one of my friends, alhamdulillah, and also a teacher. And I love him dearly, and I ask Allah to bless him and his family and preserve him for Islam and for the Muslims. He gave me the project in our previous 10-week course. He gave me the project of talking about the major themes of the Quran. And from what I benefited from that study and from that teaching is that Surah Al-Fatiha, these 7 ayat, are an outline for all of the rest of the Quran. And those 7 ayat, they cover what the next 113 surahs are going to cover. And so if you have a good understanding of what Surah Al-Fatiha means, you kind of use that as a reference when you read. As you're reading, you say, okay, what is Allah talking about here? Which aspect of Surah Al-Fatiha is Allah talking about? And then all Allah is giving you in those other surahs is what? Detail about what he mentions in Surah Al-Fatiha.
Ibn Abbas.
Yes, sir.
Said if he was to write a Quran, he would put the Fatiha before each surah in the Quran.
Allahu Akbar. MashaAllah. Brother mentioned that he read, that Ibn Abbas mentioned, that if he were to put or compile a Quran, like a different one.
No, the Quran itself. But this is what he would do. He was just saying that he would put the Fatiha before each surah.
Jamil. So he says if he were to have compiled the Quran, he would have put Surah Al-Fatiha at the beginning of each surah. Jamil.
And that comes down to what you're talking about, right?
It does. And if that athar is authentic, then definitely it gives greater credence and greater authority to the idea that Surah Al-Fatiha is the outline, that a person is reminded at the beginning of each chapter that don't forget these main points. Yes?
Athar, if that athar is correct.
Athar is generally used to talk about what is related from a sahabi, as opposed to hadith. But you'll find some of the scholars use athar to talk about what's been related from the Prophet ﷺ as well. Yeah, athar is more general, whereas hadith is more specific. The plural of athar is athar. Yeah. No. So, Surah Al-Fatiha, I've listed here, we'll just read through those for the sake of time. Surah Al-Fatiha, and I'll mention to you the points where they're mentioned. Surah Al-Fatiha covers what I've come away with. There are probably more that I've missed, but this is what I've come away with. The major points that are discussed in Surah Al-Fatiha. Number 1, the enmity of the devil. The hatred of the devil for us, of the shaitan for us. And that's found in when we begin reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, which is where we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, that we're supposed to say that before we begin. And so Allah talks in detail in the Quran about the shaitan's hatred for us, why he hates us, and how he tries to get us to fumble, and the remedy. When he does cause us to slip, how do we deal with it? Number 2, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is covered in Bismillah. Bismillah, when we say Bismillah, Bismillah is from the remembrance of Allah. And Allah mentions in the Quran when we should say it. For example, he says in the morning, in the evening, those who remember Allah standing up and lying down and on their sides, yani, that we're supposed to remember Allah all the time, as much as possible. He also mentions in the Quran why we should remember Him. Remember Him. Why should we remember Him? Yani to seek protection and And in the different instances where he mentions, Alhamdulillah, why do you praise Allah? For taking care of you, because of his good names and attributes, his beautiful names and attributes. Again, a lot of detail could go into this. We spent 10 weeks talking about it, and that wasn't even enough time. But again, this is Allah's speech. And as Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي. Say if the oceans were ink for the speech of my Lord, the oceans would dry up. And how can we as human beings expect to encompass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech? How can we find the words to encompass everything, to encompass all the meanings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech? And if you were to take all of the tafsir books written, from the time that the first one was written until now, they could not exhaust. They haven't captured all of the meanings of the Quran. Why? Because they're human and deficient, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect. His speech it cannot be encompassed. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِهِ عِلْمًا, and they cannot encompass him with his knowledge. Now, number 3, Allah's perfect and beautiful names and qualities, which are captured in the concept of Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And Allah mentions his most important qualities that we should be reminded of, that he reminds us of throughout the Quran. And that his other qualities are a part of these other major qualities. What are his major qualities? Number 1, that he takes care of us. He's Rabbil Alameen. Number 2, that he's merciful. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And number 3, that he is in control. That he's the Malik. He's the Malik and the Malik. That he is the king and he is the owner. That he has the dominion. And so Allah talks in detail about that in the Quran. Number 4, he gives detail about the day of judgment. Yani Maliki Yawmiddin. He talks about worship and its types. Iyyaka na'budu. Worship and its types. And a part of its, the different types of worship is making dua, as we've just seen. And the importance of depending on Allah. Iyyaka nasta'een. And that no matter how much you know and how righteous you are, you still need Allah's help. What example did we see of that?
Musa.
The prophets. All of the prophets. All the prophets. No one can get closer to Allah than the prophets. No one knows more about Allah than the prophets. And in spite of how much they knew and how much they worshiped and how close they were to Allah, they still did what? They still hastened to worship him. And they still called on him for everything. And they still called on him for everything. And so we still the importance of depending on Allah. Number 7, the importance of brotherhood in Islam. Iyyaka na'bud. You do, we worship. Not I worship. You do, we worship. Iyyaka na'bud wa iyyaka nasta'een. And you do, we seek help. The idea that doing it together is important. Number 8, the constant need for guidance. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. And this dua we say 17 times a minimum each day. Every rak'ah of your prayer you have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. And in each rak'ah you have to ask Allah for what? Guidance. Allah only commanded you to ask for it so much. Allah told you and makes you ask for it so much because you need it that much. Because you need it that much. You need to ask for guidance at least 17 times a day. Guide me, guide me, guide me, guide me, guide me. Now, number 9, showing gratitude and recognizing Allah's blessings. The greatest blessing, which is Islam. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. The path of those that you have blessed. That you see guidance as a what? As a blessing. That you see guidance as a what? As a blessing, as a ni'mah. An'amta alayhim. It's a ni'mah. And if you recognize it's a blessing, then that means that you need to show gratitude. And so it reminds us that we need to be grateful. Allah talks about great gratitude, and he gives us examples of gratitude. Number 10, the struggles of the believers before us at all levels, the prophets and everyone else. صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, the path of those whom you have blessed. Who is Allah blessed? Now, we mentioned it. The prophets, the people of truth, the martyrs, those who were killed in the cause of Allah, and the righteous. All four of those groups struggled. All four of those groups struggled. And that's a part of the reason why Allah tells you their stories. Allah tells you about the prophets, and He tells you about the believers, and how they were afraid, and how things were difficult, and how they were threatened. Allah tells you about Musa, and He tells you about the sorcerers. Were the sorcerers prophets? No. When they believed, what happened? As soon as they believed,
They were martyred.
they were tested. Allah never says they died.
Oh, yeah.
No, they were threatened. But Fir'aun threatened Musa as well. Did he kill him?
No.
No. And so we don't know for sure that the sorcerers were even killed, but they were threatened. As soon as they accepted Islam, they were what? They were threatened. And how did they deal with being threatened? He said, I'm going to crucify you and cut your hands and feet from opposite sides. What they say? Do what you got to do. We're not worried about you. What are we worried about? Meeting Allah. Is Allah going to forgive us because we were a part of your plot to deceive people? That's what we're worried about. As for you, do what you got to do. But Allah tells us those stories. Why? Just to tell us the story so you can be entertained? No. To let you know that whatever struggles you're going through, other people went through. Maryam, she said, I wish I was dead before this. And because of labor pains? No, not because of labor pains. Because of the shame of having, I'm going to tell my people, I'm going to come to my people. I've tried to be righteous all my life. I'm going to come to these people with this baby, and they're going to do what? They're going to accuse me of all types of stuff. It's going to bring shame to my family and whatnot. You know what? I might not be able to deal with it. And so Allah consoled her. Don't worry, we'll take care of it. Everybody gets scared. Everybody has those moments. And you see through those stories that Allah brought them through. And so the idea is that the struggles, everybody struggles. As Allah mentions at the very beginning of Surah Al-Ankabut, chapter number 29 of the Quran, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do people think that they will say they believe in Allah and they will not be tested? But Allah tells us those stories so we can see it. Even between the family. Yusuf alayhi salam. And notice his capacity to forgive. Because it's not about me.
It's an example of us today. We have families.
Right, with our families. People are going to wrong you and do harm by you. And that just like you want Allah to forgive you, that you have to learn to forgive other people. And just like you make mistakes, other people are going to make mistakes. If you can't keep, let me talk about me. If I can't keep my duty to Allah, how do I expect anyone else to keep their duty to me? Perfectly. If I can't be a perfect servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in spite of His goodness to me, how do I expect anyone else to be perfect to me in terms of how they deal with me? So if I want Allah to overlook and pardon me, then I need to be able to do that for other people. Number 11, the causes of Allah's wrath. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ. Allah gives you details about those whom He was angry with and those who went astray and why they went astray so that you can avoid it. And number 12, the importance of following the messenger. The maghdubi alayhim and al-dhalin, those whom Allah is angry with and who went astray. Allah was angry with them and they went astray because of what? Because of their refusal to follow the messenger. The Jews refused to follow the Prophet ﷺ. They refused to follow his example even though they knew it to be the truth. And the Christians, they wanted to follow righteousness, but they refused to accept him as a messenger and follow his knowledge and his example. And so both of them, even though they had two different characteristics, they are also the same in the sense that they both rejected the messenger. They both rejected the Prophet ﷺ. And so Allah emphasizes the importance of following the Prophet. And that beware, as he mentions at the end of Surah An-Nur, chapter number 24 of the Quran, beware of going against the Prophet. فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَن تُصِيبَهُم فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبَهُم عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Let those beware who go against his commands, at the very end of the surah, unless they be afflicted with some type of tribulation or touched by some type of punishment. All right, we'll quickly finish because I've already gone over the time. So Surah Al-Fatiha, again, as you read the Quran, use Surah Al-Fatiha, these 12 points here, use these as a reference to figure out what's being talked about. Is Allah talking about the Day of Judgment? Is he talking about worshiping him? Is he talking about the messenger? Okay, what details now is he giving me about this? What does he want me to know in what he's telling me? So using Surah Al-Fatiha as a reference point. Next, knowing when and why. Knowing the reasons behind revelation. Knowing why revelation was sent down. Because sometimes we can misunderstand an ayah because we don't know its purpose. A book has been translated recently. I haven't read it in English, but again, when we look at the quality of translations for the Quran, I mean, again, you kind of having to depend on those other translations. So the fact that the book exists, inshallah, is a benefit, if nothing else. It is the translation of Sheikh Muqbil's book on the Sahih al-Musnad min Asbab al-Nuzul, the authentic collection of the reasons of revelation. It's been translated in English. It's available in the Islamic bookstores I've seen here. It's got a bluish, blackish cover. It's there. If you look, ask for Sheikh Muqbil's book on the reasons of revelation, he collects authentic ahadith that deal with why certain ayat were revealed. And so it's a nice resource to have in order to be able to gain greater understanding of the Quran. And so an example that we have here is from Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah says, spend in the cause of Allah and don't let your own hands throw you into destruction. وَأَنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Spend in the cause of Allah and don't let your own hands throw you into destruction. What does that mean, don't let your own hands throw you into destruction? Yes?
Don't hold back giving the money for the
right.
cause of Allah.
Don't hold back giving in the cause of Allah. Now, some people might look at that and think that has to do with suicide. Don't let your own hands throw you into destruction. And that's what some people understood after the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, as you'll find in this collection of reasons of revelation, he was on the lines in battle, and one person rode out on his horse into the enemy lines and was killed. And so the people said, look at him. He's used his own hands and thrown himself into destruction. And he committed suicide. And it wasn't suicide, no. And he was trying to fight for the cause of Allah and encourage the people behind him. But the fact that he threw himself into enemy hands and he knew he didn't have a chance at victory, he was the cause of his own destruction. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari says, no, that's not what that ayat means. He says, when Islam began to grow and prosper, the Ansar came together, the helpers. We came together and said, we spent a lot for Islam and we've neglected ourselves and our families. So why don't we stop spending on Islam so much and start spending on ourselves again? He said, and the Prophet wasn't around us. And this ayat was revealed about us. And he don't stop spending in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what you've done is good. And Allah has blessed you for what you've done. Don't cut off. Be consistent. Continue to spend in the cause of Allah. So that's the idea. That this ayat was revealed for a certain reason. And again, if Allah blesses a person to do a certain act of worship and to find ease in doing that worship, whether it's prayer, whether it's fasting, whether it's spending in the cause of Allah, don't stop. Don't stop. Keep doing it. Because as we mentioned previously, that could be your door to Jannah. There's a door for prayer. There's a door for charity. There's a door for fighting in the cause of Allah. There's a door for fasting. Keep consistent until you get to that door. Now, so knowing the reasons of revelation. Also knowing the style, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks. So from the ways that Allah speaks is that he gives details to the messenger in general. Allah will give you a general guideline, and the details is for the messenger. And so, for example, Allah says all throughout the Quran, Aqimus salat wa atu zakat. Establish prayer and give zakat. Like, how do you know how to establish prayer?
From the Sunnah of the Prophet.
From the Sunnah of the Prophet. How to do the takbir, how many raka'at, what to say in sajda, what to say in ruku'ah. All that you learn from what? From the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah usually leaves the details to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you find that Allah gives detail about something in the Quran, that means it's very important. It's so important that Allah didn't leave this to the messenger. He told you himself. And so from those ayat are the ayat of inheritance. Allah goes in Surah An-Nisa, chapter number 4 of the Quran. Allah goes into details. This person gets an eighth, and this person gets a third, and this person gets a fourth, and this person gets half. And if it's two sisters, they get 2/3. Why all that detail? Why is he saying all of this? You know, a person might get bored. Like, what am I supposed to benefit from this? You benefit from it, the importance of following these inheritance laws. Because when someone dies, and you've seen it in your own families. When someone dies and leaves money or property or whatever, what happens? People fight. People fight. And Allah hates that people fight. Even family, even non-Muslim family. Allah commands you to respect your parents and to be good to them. And so because it's important for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we be together, because that's important to him, he does what? He himself speaks about how this property is to be divided, so no one has a say-so after that. No one says anything. This is how much the wife gets, this is how much the husband gets, this is how much the children get, and it's done. You have no say-so in how this is divided. So now there's no longer a reason for any fighting. When you see that Allah gives detail about something in his book, that means that that issue is important. Because otherwise he would have left it to the messenger to give you the details. And so now when we read that ayat, it's not boring. You realize the hikmah. Why is Allah giving all this detail? Because again, Surah An-Nisa, that's where this ayat are. It begins with what? Ya ayyuhan nas taqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida. We hear it all the time. Fear your Lord that created you from one soul and created from that soul his mate and made from them countless men and women. And fear Allah by whom you demand your mutual rights and revere the wombs that bore you. Keep your family relationships. Allah is watching you. And so Allah is giving you detail now how to help keep those relationships together. In the same surah, he begins the surah with the introduction, and then the rest of those ayat are giving you detail about how to keep those relationships together. I'm telling you, the Quran is a miracle. We don't appreciate it because we don't read it and reflect on it. That book is amazing. It's amazing. It's the miracle. If a person reads the Quran and understands it, you need no other evidence that Islam is the truth. No other evidence. Because no way this book is going to be that consistent. Except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, and also that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will use he'll talk about the parts of something to talk about the whole of something. We have this whole concept, and Allah will talk about a part of it because that part is important. Because that part is important. And so, for example, Allah says, Allah would never cause your iman to be lost. Surely Allah is ever gracious and most merciful to humanity. Chapter number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat number 143. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِالنَّاسِ لَرَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. What does iman mean here?
Prayer.
Prayer. Ahsan. Allah bless you. Prayer. Allah calls prayer in this ayat what? Iman. Why does he call prayer iman? Because it's from the most important aspects of your iman. If a person leaves off prayer completely, he is outside of Islam. If he leaves off prayer, absolutely does not pray, stops completely, no prayers, out of Islam. Because of the importance of prayer, Allah calls prayer iman. And you can see it in the sequence of ayats, and you can see it in the reasons of revelation. The Sahaba asked when the Qibla was changed. It comes in the sequence of ayat about the changing of the Qibla. What about those who prayed to Jerusalem and never prayed to Mecca? What's going to happen to their salat? Allah won't let your iman be lost. He's not going to let you lose your iman, yani your prayers. That's the idea. Walaikum salam. And again, that there's a connection between the ayat and also the names of Allah that follow. That from knowing the meanings of Allah's names and attributes, that when Allah mentions an ayat and then mentions His name after that, then it shows the connection between those. I didn't provide any examples for that. But again, what I want you to just see is just some general principles, and I'm glad I gave you some type of document. Again, it could be better, but at least you have some point of reference to follow. You can, alhamdulillah, the brothers are videotaping the lecture, so you can go back and watch it again and just kind of take these principles in slowly. And again, you'll see an improvement, and the more you read and the more regularly you read the Quran, the more you will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings out more of those meanings. You read it? I hate to make the comparison because Allah's book is so much greater, but I just make it to bring it better. A person watches a movie. And if a person watches the same movie 5 times, the first time you just watched it, and then after that you begin to see things and notice things in the film that you hadn't noticed before. Well, you read this book, to Allah belongs the greatest example. You read this book, and you read it the first time, and you pick up some things. But the more you read it, the more you begin to see and notice that you didn't notice before. Number 4, use acceptable translations. Some people have translations in their phones that they have, and they're in English, and that's great. But then they read it, and they don't understand even English. Find a translation that is understandable for you. You don't want a translation that you find it difficult to get through. 2 that I would say are decent are the Sahih International Translation. That's a pretty good one in terms of just the reading of the English. Also, the Clear Quran by Mustafa al-Khattab. He'll put sometimes in the ayat the meaning, even though the wording is not there. So he'll put the meaning in there even though it doesn't say that. Just like the ayat that we just saw, and don't let your hands throw you into destruction by withholding. By withholding. That by withholding is not an ayat. Yeah. But he brings it there so that you know what it's talking about. But those are 2 decent translations. And again, the point is, if you're going to read a translation, read one that you can read. Don't read one with all these big words and it's difficult to understand and whatnot, because then you're not going to be able to benefit from it. And finally, use some supporting exegesis or tafsir. Allah has blessed us in this day and time to have access to a lot more tafsir than have been available previously, from the best of them. From the best of them, for those who speak Arabic and those who don't, is the tafsir of Imam al-Sa'di, Abdurrahman ibn Nasir al-Sa'di, rahimahullah ta'ala, Taysir Karim al-Rahman, fi tafsir Kalam al-Mannan, or that's the title, I believe that's the title, but Taysir Karim al-Rahman. His tafsir, the tafsir of al-Sa'di, and I've seen different publications of it. There's one by Dar es-Salaam. It's okay. There's another one that only half of it has been done up to Surah Al-Isra. It's 2 big brown and yellow looking volumes. The print is much larger than the other 2. That one's decent. That one's a pretty good one. Islamic International Publishing House has done the whole thing in 10 volumes. I haven't read it though. It's just called Tafsir al-Sa'di or Tafsir al-Sa'di. It's 10 volumes. I haven't read it, so I don't know how decent the translation is. But you want to see someone or read someone that's connected to the Quran, Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Nasr al-Sirdi. Words, I can't put into words how beautiful his translation is. I mean, he gives you principles, and he's not going word for word. He's like taking ayat and then giving you the overall meaning. Like he's giving you themes and principles and the general meaning and the gist of what you're supposed to get from the ayat. It's a beautiful tafsir. I mean, anyone who reads that tafsir, just by reading the tafsir, you'll learn how to reflect on the Quran more. It has been very important in my own life, in my own reflection on the Quran. It's a wonderful, wonderful tafsir, and I encourage anyone who is able to read it, to reflect on it, to use it as a point of reference. Of course, we have Tafsir Ibn Kathir, the abridged one, the Noble Quran, the 7-volume one, which gives you reference to a hadith, helps you with the reasons of revelation. Those are excellent, but you're not going to find Imam al-Sa'di, rahimahullah, he is a bridge between the present and the past. If you want access to the scholars of the past, but in a way that you can digest, he is that bridge. He is that bridge. He is a bridge to the past. Allah has blessed him. You see that in all of the works that he has done, rahimahullah ta'ala. You know, and it's sufficient. It's sufficient for him as a testimony to his scholarship. The Sheikh Husaymin was his student. That he was one of Sheikh Husaymeen's first teachers. One of Sheikh Husaymeen's teachers. Rahimahullah ta'ala. Rahimahullah. Jami'an. And with that, inshallah, we've concluded this class. I've gone well over my given time. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us our sins and our shortcomings, to help us to benefit from what we have heard, to help us to follow the best of it, and help us to benefit from this Ramadan, to help us to meet it and to benefit from it, and to be better people after it, and to continue in the guidance that He's blessed us with, even after Ramadan. Sallallahu alayhi wa Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi. Sallallahu ta'ala da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Yes.
No, Hanif. So my question was, as far as in the salat, like we're coming from a non-Arabic background. Some of us we understand some Arabic, alhamdulillah. When you talked about the Fatiha, like the degrees of tadabbur and what we get from those ayat, I know like in our 5 daily salawat, you know, we're basically at the expense, you know, the time that the Imam gives us for the Fatiha.
Right.
When we're making salat at night, for example, if we're by ourselves and we're making those night prayers or sunnah prayers, is there anything in the deen that allows for, like, I know you can make salat for a long time standing. What is your advice concerning one wanting to get more reflection into tadabbur from the Fatiha in their standing, as far as saying the ayat, and like, is there allowed to be time of reflection while you're reciting your Fatiha?
So the brother's asking about reflecting on Surah Al-Fatiha. You mentioned many of the different meanings to be reflected upon in that surah, and that sometimes it's difficult in the mandatory prayers. And so are the non-mandatory prayers, the extra prayers that we make, is that a time to be able to reflect, and is there a limit on how much time we take? We take much time. If you want to stand, for 2, 3, 5 minutes thinking about it, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, you can do that. And that's a part of the benefit of the night prayer. In Nashiyat al-Layl, hiya ashaddu wat'an. That's from the scholars of Tafsir that mention that the praying at night, it allows you a better opportunity to grasp those meanings. So yeah, you can spend time on the ayat, you can repeat ayat, all those things are possible. Yeah, you reflect and take it. And that's the idea. The idea of, as the Prophet said to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, من صلى للناس فليوجز إذا صليت للناس من صلى للناس فليوجز. Whoever prays leading people should be brief. Yeah? وإذا صليت لنفسك ومن صلى لنفسه فليتطول ما شاء كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Whoever prays for himself, take as long as you want. It's you. It's up to you. So yes, using those other times as a time to reflect and to gain those meanings, yes, definitely. It's a wonderful opportunity for that. No, I mean, that's why really the prayer at night, especially in Ramadan, if we're praying, it's congregational, but you know, just if it could be longer, you know, if it could be longer, it's a little bit longer and slower. You know, some people just rush through it, and if someone just read it and, you know, took their time, you know.
So you are allowed, as far as the repetition, I know there's a different narration, but they used to say an ayat till even in that morning time. But like, so in doing your repetition
I mean,
of that
it's
ayat,
not going to be prayer if you don't finish. You don't, you know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, you got to force, but I mean, like,
sometimes things are mentioned, but they are exaggerations, just to show that it was done a lot.
yeah.
You know, so they say, for example, when a tabi'i Masruq, he performed Hajj and he spent the entire night prostrated. Well, he slept. There's no way he went for an entire, I mean, all the distance from to traveling to Hajj. There's no way he didn't sleep. But the idea is just so that he did it a lot. You know, so the idea of repeating the same ayat until the morning, and a person didn't get outside of Fatiha. No, the person prayed. The idea of them doing it a lot.
And not to that extent, but I mean, like when you said repeating the ayats, you can repeat the ayat, like for example.
Yeah, I don't know any restriction on that. I mean, you just need to be conscious of the time. But also, take your time with it. You know, it's your time. You know, it's your time. Yes.
Exactly.
Ustaz, after 20 plus years of being lazy and using the crutch of the English translation, I finally moved to top of the masjid and sat with my teacher Monday and Friday after Fajr 2 years straight and got half a juice. Now I don't even look at the English outside of Ibn Kathir Tafsir. I mean, am I too extreme? Do I need to read the English?
Okay, so the brother asked about, you know, learning to memorize, starting to memorize the Quran and not looking at the English. When you say not looking at the English to be able to read or to recite?
I recite all the Arabic that I've been taught for 2+ years.
Okay.
I'll go to Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, to try to get some understanding because I don't know the Arabic language.
Okay, so good. So the idea of what we're talking about here, we're not talking about recitation. We're not talking about recitation, we're talking about understanding. And so if you're reciting those ayat and you don't understand Arabic, then you have to depend on an English. Yeah, so, and that's the point here. Bring both worlds together. Recite, and that's good, and you're getting hasanat for recitation, but read.
Balance.
Yeah, the point of the Quran being sent down, as Allah mentions himself in the Quran, in chapter number 38, Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarak liyadabbaru ayati. It's a blessed book that we've sent down to you to be reflected upon. If you don't understand what it's saying, you can't reflect. You understand what I'm saying? So you have to read what you can understand to be able to now think, what does this mean for my life? How can I draw closer to Allah with what I've read? How can I be a better person with what I've read? You know, I mean, again, you take a chapter like Sabbih Isma Rabbika al-A'la. What do you benefit from that? Your Lord is al-A'la. What does it mean he's al-A'la? He's al-A'la in every way. He's al-A'la in himself. And he is above all of his creation. He is al-A'la in terms of his knowledge, in terms of his mercy, in terms of his goodness. He is al-A'la, he should be al-A'la in our hearts. And then he goes into detail about what makes him al-A'la. الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى. The one who created and made everything proportionate in terms of how he created it. That look at the perfection of his creation. Is there anything that can do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did? How can you make anything equal to him in your heart? And no one can do what he does. وَالَّذِي قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. And the one who created everything. The one who decreed everything. That everything is under his control. And guided everything to what it was, what it's supposed to do. And not just that you recite those ayat, but that you begin to now, how does that improve your knowledge of Allah? How does that improve your practice of Islam? How does that make you a better person and improve your salvation? What is he saying about the Day of Judgment? What is he saying about brotherhood in Islam? All of those 12 themes, those 12 different topics that we talked about in Surah Al-Fatiha, that you're using everything you read to go back to that. To go back to that. No. One last question, please.
Hanif, are there any books that you can recommend, Arabic or English? Are there any books with compilations of statements of tadabbur for different or various ayat of the Quran?
Brother asked about a book dealing with ayat of tadabbur. Number one, Tafsir al-Sa'di.
Okay.
it's phenomenal. Number two, he has another book, but it's in Arabic. It hasn't been translated into English. I asked Allah to help me to translate it into English. It's an excellent book. It's called Al-Qawaid Al-Hisan Al-Muta'alliq bi Tafsir Al-Quran. Beautiful principles, perfect principles, excellent principles connected to the explanation of the Quran. It's a very thin book, but it's, mashallah, yeah. I'm telling you, when you see all that he's done, all of his works, you see that he had a special connection with the Quran. That he gave the Quran time in his life, and you see that in what Allah blessed him to do, and that Allah has. He was from a very small city in Saudi Arabia, Unaiza, from a very small city. But when you see that Allah has blessed an individual who's from a very small area, when you see that Allah has blessed his information to spread all over the world, you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed that individual. And I don't know, well, like I know that many people. The people who I know who are learned have benefited from him tremendously and continue to benefit from him. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to continue to benefit from him and to give him light in his grave and to increase his hasanat every time we read the words that Allah blessed him to write, and to help us to have deeds that we can leave, that people benefit from, so that we can have light in our grave, so that Allah improves our condition and blesses us with his mercy and his forgiveness. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Jazakallah khairan for your time and forgive me for going over.
Jazakallah khairan.
Hanif, could you write the title of that book for me, please?
What's that?
Could you write the title of the book for me, please? The title of the Quran Al-Hisan.
Okay.
Shukran. Jazakallah.
If you have a tablet, you can find it in PDF form.
Yeah, I'm searching on PDF on my phone or something. Jazakallah.
So I'm sorry for going over.
Like that. This person, my phone.